I'm here at Rice University with our very own Zack Kopplin, most famous for his political aspirations against the creationist movement in Louisiana. Would you like to introduce yourself, Zack?
Thanks. I'm Zach. I'm a sophomore at Hanson, and I've been fighting creationism in Louisiana and across the country since I was a senior in high school.
Okay, so first we're just going to start off a bit more casual. Let's just ask you a couple questions about, your life at Rice and stuff, and then we'll probably get into the more often asked questions about you. So for starters, I guess, what is your major? Is it something related to biology or?
I'm actually a history major.
Really? Then, I guess what really, what sort of, or I guess, why do you like being a history major?
I mean, history naturally makes sense to me. Science, I'm really messy, and so it's like I sometimes will write my 2s as 3s or something, and it can make science much more tough for me. But history is something that's just always clicked in my brain, and I enjoy that more. I mean, I'm also going into the politics side of things, and history fits that much better, I think.
So you mentioned the politics side of history. So you would say that you're more interested in like sort of current events and like the modern history, or do you sort of like looking back at the more ancient times?
I mean, both. I mean, I've taken a lot of Chinese history. I've taken some American. I've taken some Middle Eastern history classes, more modern, sort of history of the Middle East. And I mean, I'm interested in all of it. It's not bad to learn anything.
Okay, interesting. So are there any sort of movements you're involved with around Rice, or does mostly, your sort of continual crusade against this creationist movement take up most of your time?
I work with the Rice Dems, but most of my work does end up on these campaigns out of state or in Austin.
The Rice Stems, what is that?
No, Rice Democrats. Rice Democrats.
Okay. I guess, what sort of work do you do with the Rice Democrats?
I mean, where I intersect with the work I do on creationism is with school vouchers, where I found a lot of schools that are receiving public money and teaching creationism, and the Democrats also generally are opposed to these vouchers too for other reasons, so I work with them on that same issue often.
Okay, for those of us who don't really know, school vouchers are, and correct me if I'm wrong, essentially just a program wherein the U.S. government will pay for will give money to certain private institutions, provided that they follow a couple key regulations. What are the sort of things that these schools that teach creationism violate, I guess, in the school voucher program?
There aren't really any actual regulations on what these schools can do or teach because they're private. But the problem is they've started accepting public money, which that puts them in a place where they're not exactly private anymore. And so we found schools in Louisiana that are teaching the Loch Ness Monster is real and disproves evolution, that the KKK was a moral institution, that dragons were real, they were dinos, and that dinos once lived with humans, stuff like that.
Oh, okay. So then, I guess then you sort of start the crusade to take away the school vouchers, to reform the schools. How does this work?
So that started this summer. I got interested in that after finding out about some of the things these schools were teaching, and I researched it last summer, and found that it wasn't just 1 or 2 schools, but it was actually a large number of schools in Louisiana and across the country, hundreds across the country.
Yeah, so I guess most of the news reports I certainly hear about are coming out of Louisiana, but I guess what are some of the other states, perhaps some of the more surprising states that you found these schools in?
So Indiana is supposed to be the gold standard of accountability for voucher programs, has schools that take students to the Creation Museum itself and receive public money. And my favorite school is one in Florida, which calls Evolution the Way of the Heathen.
Oh, how exciting! So I guess let's talk about your probably most famous thing for the repealing the Louisiana Science Education Act. Would you care to explain in a couple words what exactly that act entailed?
So we still have this law, actually. There's a state law in Louisiana that's part of a new wave of creationist legislation. It allows creationism into public school science classes through supplemental materials to, quote, critique evolution and climate change as controversial scientific theories. And so this is stealth legislation because creationists can no longer promote it openly as intelligent design or creationism and hope to get it in public schools, but they can still try and undermine evolution and sneak it in that way.
Okay. Well, from what I read, apparently it's the actual wording is basically allows supplemental material that's critical of established sciences. Do you think that perhaps this could actually be used, to sort of teach more the more controversial, perhaps not creationism or the thing, but sort of just the controversy surrounding, string theory or something? Or is it mostly just used for the creationist agenda?
I mean, no one's going to talk. I mean, you don't really hear that much about string theory in a high school classroom anyway. That's the thing when we get into discussing controversies. There are controversies at the cutting edge of evolution, but the fundamentals of evolution, what you're taught in high school, are solid. And the idea behind this law was just challenging these theories as a whole. Is challenging the established science that all the evidence and all the scientists support. And so it's not really about like I mean, you brought up string theory. You'll never see. I don't think you'll ever see supplemental materials brought in to discuss the controversies over string theory in a classroom. Now, I mean, you could. I mean, it would be legal, which would be, I guess, a good thing. But on the other hand, under this law, we mentioned creationism, but this law would allow. Technically, I could bring in an astrologer from New Orleans and have them teach about how their tarot cards predict, like, if you're gonna get a burn tomorrow. And technically, that law is so open that it would allow that.
Okay. And so I guess since we're talking about creationism a lot, and you brought up astrology, there's sort of a heavy religious undertone. Would you say that, your current battle is one against religion or more just ignorance?
I would say for science would be the best way to say it. I'm not fighting against religion or even against ignorance per se. I'm fighting to make sure students are taught good science and we can have more scientific advancements in our future.
Okay, so I guess you mentioned earlier that you were part of the Rice Democrats, and you seem to be a lot involved in sort of the political spectrum of things. Do you plan to continue after Rice to go into politics?
Yeah, I think I'll keep doing this. I don't think this is a fight that's going to be over in my lifetime, so I think I'll keep doing it for as long as I live.
Okay, and I guess just do you have any future plans as to how you're going to continue into politics? Will you become a lobbyist? Will you try to get a higher position?
I mean, I'm working on getting an organization started in the near future, and I think I'll continue with that. An organization, maybe a 501c4 political action committee.
I guess my next question would probably be, what is a 501c4 political action committee?
So a nonprofit, which is one organization that I'm sure more people are familiar with, can take money, but it can only spend limited amounts on political campaigning. A political action committee can spend unlimited amounts, but it's not tax deductible funds that it can accept. So there's a difference in how the money is used and how it's received.
Okay, and so would this be part of the second Giant Leap campaign that I heard you talk that I read on Wikipedia about?
Yep, that would actually be what we'd call the nonprofit.
I guess probably something that a couple people are interested in is I guess if it's not too personal, would you mind discussing your own religious leanings?
I usually just keep, because it's not really, this isn't about religion per se. That's what I usually, it's like the only religion that's ever actually brought into this is the creationists trying to bring religion into the science classrooms. Because science isn't a religion. You don't believe in science. You don't have faith in science. You understand the science behind evolution. You accept it. I accept established science. And because of that, I accept gravity. So I accept that if I jump up, I'm going to land back down. But I don't, it's not really a belief system. So that distinction usually needs to be made.
Okay, fair enough. I guess sort of what brought you to Rice University?
I mean, who knows how to answer that? It's just college admissions, and right. I came to Rice. I liked it. I ended up coming here, and that's how it worked. I mean, I think everyone does that.
All right, fair enough. So one of the main people that actually helped you along your way with the to fight the Louisiana Science Education Act is a famous Rice professor, Harry Croto. I guess would you just like to say a couple words as to how you guys met?
Well, Bob Curl is actually the professor. Harry Croto worked with him quite closely. Harry Croto is a professor at Florida State who, at the very beginning of this fight, I was talking to my mentor, Dr. Barbara Forrest, about who was a major scientist who might help us, and she gave his name. And I sent him an email, and I talked with him, and he was all for supporting my campaign. And I had written a letter from I drafted a letter from Nobel laureate scientists to the Louisiana legislature, and I was looking to get some signatures on it. So I asked if he could help, and the next day I woke up with his signature and the signature of Bob Curl, who's a Nobel laureate at Rice, the next day, and about 10 other signatures on the list. And so I'm extremely grateful for his help and for, honestly, Dr. Curl's help for all they've done.
So I know they signed your petition, but did you ever actually have some, sort of face-to-face time talking with them, or how did that work?
I've met Dr. Curl once, and I usually talk to Sir Harry. I keep in contact with him. I've developed a friendship with him over the last few years, I think.
Okay. I guess what sort of convinced you to sort of champion this cause and take on all the responsibilities and the countless hours of work you've put into it?
If you wanted to find a law that sort of find a face of everything that embarrassed me about my home state in Louisiana at the time, it was the Louisiana Science Education Act, and it was simply wrong, and I knew it was wrong, and so I took it on.
Okay, fair enough. I guess you've mentioned your political leanings. How much would you say that the sort of Democrat-Republican fight fits into this, or most Republicans recognize that this is sort of a silly thing and have tried to help?
So science isn't a partisan issue. Having said that, there is a little bit of a problem where the right wing of U.S. politics does seem to lean to be more anti-science. They're more likely to deny climate change revolution. They're more likely to want to cut science funding, and that is very unfortunate. And so it does, while it isn't partisan, it does seem to line up on party lines sometimes. Having said that, there are some Republicans in Louisiana who've definitely earned our praise for what they've done in support of science. Dan Claytor was the sole vote. There was 3 votes on a repeal bill last year, and we lost 2-1, and the only vote we had for us was from a Republican. Our bill was sponsored by a Democrat, the chairwoman of the state Democratic Party, and our one vote was from Dan Claytor, Republican, who represents LSU. And then Quentin Dastu, who was a Republican member of the House of Representatives a while back, actually was a plaintiff in the case that challenged Louisiana's first creationism law in front of the Supreme Court. And so he deserves special mention, too.
Okay. So I guess, sort of continuing on this track, what is sort of like the best, what is the best thing that you've sort of, like the best comment or sort of thing that you've found coming out of this? And I imagine you've also been called some pretty nasty things, I guess. Would you care to, perhaps elaborate on maybe the worst thing that anyone's ever said or told you?
So I just got my first death threat recently. I got told that I would have what came to Madeline Murray O'Hare, who, for anyone who doesn't know, her and her family were kidnapped, mutilated, and murdered. So that may be the one that was posted on an article, the cover piece of the Houston Press recently about me, and so that one creeped me out a little bit, and I'm hopefully going to have. I would love to have that investigated. Some of the more funny ones I've heard my favorite one is someone commented that I was the cause of Hurricane Katrina, which. I remember Hurricane Katrina was a bit tragic. I remember it very distinctly, but it was also 3 years before the Louisiana Science Education Act was passed, and then there was 3 years after that before I even began to take it on. So the timetable doesn't really match up.
Okay. So I guess, that's most of the stuff I wanted to talk about. Are there any last points you'd like to cover before we go on to the sort of second half of this interview?
That's it. We can go on.
So the second part of this interview is just a sort of survey that I like to ask all the people I interview at the very end. It's a couple sort of one-word answers, and then a couple where I'm going to just say the first half of a sentence and you fill in the rest. Okay?
We'll see how this goes.
All right. Name.
Zach.
Job.
Science advocate.
Sex.
Male.
Alma mater.
Rice.
Favorite sport.
Soccer.
Favorite type of beer.
Let's go with St. Arnold's because that's the Rice one.
Favorite animal.
Dogs.
Favorite band.
Let's see. Right now, we'll go with Mighty Mighty Boss Tones right now.
Favorite movie.
Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels.
Favorite food.
Ice cream.
Favorite village person.
No idea.
Favorite clue murder weapon.
I guess there's lead pipe. That's the only one I can think of.
Favorite candidate for supreme ruler of Earth.
I don't know. I didn't know there was any candidates.
Favorite candidate for supreme person dumber than a ruler.
Rick Santorum.
Favorite member of the 1954 Arizona Cardinals starting offensive lineup.
Can you give me any names? And I'll name one.
No, I'm going to listen first and just finish the statement.
Sure.
All right. After I get up, the first thing I like to do is
Get on my computer. There we
on a Friday night, I like to
go. Do more work on science efficacy.
every year I always look forward to
We'll go with the Colbert line. The Texas State Board of Education hearings.
my first job was at.
Refereeing soccer in Baton Rouge.
If I could tell my boss one thing, I would say
I don't have a boss.
my strangest habit would be
I can't sit still ever.
I don't think that dress makes you look fat. I just think.
I wouldn't say that.
I'm not saying the Queen of England is an evil shape-shifting reptile, but you have to admit.
She's old.
And I buried the body.
Under my roommate's bed. There we go.
Well, thank you, Zack Kopplin. This has been Rice Television.